All right, let's jump right in. Picture this. You start a new job. Your new boss walks into the room, and within seconds, you've already gotten an impression of them. You've kind of decided if they're competent, if they're respected, if they're actually powerful. But how? How do you really know? What signals is your brain picking up on? Well, today we're diving into the incredible psychology of how we perceive power and how our brains take these tiny scraps of information and build a whole and sometimes totally wrong picture of the people in charge.
Seriously, think about it. You're sitting in a meeting with a manager you've just met. They barely said a word, but your brain is already working, already forming judgments. How is it doing that? Are you just looking at their job title, the way they carry themselves? The truth is, we almost never have all the facts. And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? Our brains are wired for efficiency. They're built to take shortcuts to figure out complex stuff, like who's who in the office stew. They just fill in the blanks. And when it comes to judging power, these mental shortcuts can lead to some really weird, surprisingly counterintuitive conclusions. So let's call this the power perception problem. How do our minds create this entire portrait of a leader's authority when we've only seen like a tiny corner of the canvas? Well, to figure that out, we first need to get a handle on what power even is. And lucky for us, we've got a fantastic framework for that. Way back in 1959, two social psychologists, John French and Bertram Raven, came up with this groundbreaking idea. They argued that power isn't just one single thing. It's actually a combination of 5 very distinct types. And trust me, understanding these 5 is the absolute key to unlocking this whole puzzle.
All right, so let's break them down. Think of these as the 5 fundamental ingredients in the recipe for our perception of someone's influence.
First up, we've got reward power. This one's super straightforward. It's the power of the carrot. Can your boss give you a bonus or a promotion? Yep, that's reward power.
And on the flip side, you have coercive power. This is the stick. It's the ability to assign you a terrible task or, even fire you. Third is legitimate power. This comes straight from a formal title. You listen to the CEO just because the business card says CEO. The position itself has the authority. Fourth, there's expert power. This one has nothing to do with the title and everything to do with what you know. It's why you listen to a doctor or the IT specialist. They simply know more about that one thing than you do. They've got the expertise. And finally, there's reference power. This is all about charisma. It's that person people just like. They're admired, they're respected, and you follow them simply because you want to be on their team. Okay, so we've got our 5 types of power, but how do they all mix together inside our heads? Well, this brings us to this really fascinating study from 1994 that put this very idea to the test. Researchers created this fictional manager, a guy they called Mr. Benny, just to see how we fill in those blanks. The setup was just brilliant in its simplicity. They got a bunch of university students, split them into 2 groups, and had them read a short story about Mr. Bennett. After reading it, the students just had to rate him on all 5 of those types of power we just went over. But here's the kicker. The 2 versions of the story were almost identical. The only thing that changed was Mr. Ben's ability to give rewards or dish out punishments. The high-power version could give out bonuses and fire people. The low-power version couldn't. And I mean it, that was the only difference they were told about. Just his reward and coercive power. So this leads us to the million-dollar question of the entire experiment. The participants knew absolutely nothing about Mr. Bennett's actual job title, his expertise, or his personality. So when you ask them to rate his legitimate, expert, and referent power, what are they going to say? Are they just going to guess? Or is the brain going to do something a little more creative? So let's get to the results, because this is where our brain's hidden logic really starts to show itself. And let me tell you, the findings were not at all what you might expect. Take a look at this chart. It shows the core finding. The dark bars are for the high-power Mr. Bennett, and as you'd expect, his coercive and reward ratings are high. But look at the others. The participants also rated his legitimate power, his formal authority, and his referent power, his charisma, as much, much higher, even though they had 0 information about them. Their brains just assumed. The researchers summed it up perfectly. By changing only 2 things, they influenced how people saw all 5. It's kind of like pouring water into one glass and watching the water level magically rise in 3 other glasses that aren't even connected. Our brains create these connections that aren't actually there. But believe it or not, it gets even stranger. Now check out this chart, focusing only on expert power. This is the most fascinating twist.
The high-power Mr. Bennett, the one who could fire people and hand out big bonuses, was actually seen as less of an expert. His rating was about a 6, while the low-power manager scored over a 7. So just knowing he had the power of the carrot and the stick made people assume he was less competent. Why on earth would that happen? To answer that, we need to look at the powerful mental shortcut our brain uses to make sense of the social world. This is the hidden mechanism behind all of these results. The concept is called implicit theories of power. Now, that sounds pretty academic, I know, but the idea is actually very simple. It's the story you unconsciously tell yourself about what power is supposed to look like. Essentially, over our entire lives, we build up these mental prototypes, these blueprints for different kinds of people. You've got a blueprint for a caring doctor, a creative artist, and, crucially for our story, a powerful manager. And these blueprints are what your brain uses to fill in any missing information. So here's exactly what the brain did. It took the only 2 facts it had, high reward and coercive power, and it searched for a matching blueprint. The one it found was the classic command and control boss. And that blueprint says that this kind of boss must have a high-ranking title and probably a strong personality. But, and this is the key, that same blueprint says that managers who rely on carrots and sticks often do so because they lack true expertise. They manage through force, not knowledge. So the brain automatically filled in the blank for expert power with low. And the big takeaway here is this. Your brain is doing this all the time, not just in a psychology lab. When you meet a new colleague, a new boss, or really any person in a position of authority, you are subconsciously comparing them to your internal blueprint. You are actively filling in the blanks about their competence, their character, and their authority based on just a few tiny cues and a whole lifetime of hidden assumptions. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. The next time you form a quick judgment about someone's power or their competence, just take a second and ask yourself, what information am I actually using here, and what part is my brain just filling in for me? Whose prototype, whose hidden blueprint is shaping your reality? The answer might just surprise you. Thanks for watching.